Hello everybody, Mr. Oliver again, this time talking about England. And so let's get it started in here. Alright, so when last we left England, Elizabeth I, Elizabeth Tudor, had died. Well, maybe she hadn't died when I talked about it, but just trust me, she does die. Spoilers. So, she dies. She does not leave a child. Mr. Oliver, what happened to her son? She didn't have a son. What about her daughter? She didn't have a daughter. Remember, this is the Virgin Queen, even though she probably definitely wasn't a virgin, but because she had a relationship and stuff. But that's not important. Important part is she was married to her country. So because she was married to her country, she has no heir. So when Elizabeth dies, we go from Elizabeth and the Tudor family over to her nearest male relative, which in this case is the Stuart family over in Scotland. So if you're really curious, this is it. But I mean, you can just pause it, go back and pause it if you're really into that. Okay, so James takes over. This is James right here. You can see the man has a lot of swag, as the kids say. He certainly does. And the first time he encounters his subjects, okay, this is the monarch to his subjects. He is traveling through London. His advisors say, hey, you're in your carriage. You should open your window, and you should open the curtains, and you should say hello to your subjects, sire. And he's like, oh, if they want to see me, they can see my... And he moons them. He moons his own people. That's this guy's intro. It doesn't get much better. Alright, this guy is into divine right. Now, was Elizabeth? Yeah. Elizabeth said that God had made sure that she was the queen. She kind of used it as a justification for her power because she was a lady and she kind of had to go extra out of her way to do this. James straight up believed, yo, I am a divine ruler. Why would you even argue about that? God wants me to be in charge, and he wants you to do everything I say. He writes a couple of books on the subject, including The True Law of Free Monarchy, which, and because of this, he thought, only an idiot would not want me to do whatever I want. Now, meanwhile, the English kind of saw the Scottish as being uncivilized, because, okay, if you just today, as an American, or perhaps even a Brit, or a European, or whatever, if you were asked to describe a typical Scotsman, you would probably, because these stereotypes have persevered over the years, have someone who looks a little less civilized than an Englishman. Now, I'm not saying that's true, but usually when you portray a Scotsman in fiction or whatever, he's burlier, hairier, a little bit more of a wild man, whereas your English guy tends to be a bit more like, I have my pinky up in the air. Now, obviously, not all English people are like this. I'm not saying they are. I'm just simply saying that's the stereotype, and the English bought into it. And again, if we have this in 2000 whatever, I don't want to date this too much, it's 2015, but if we have that now, imagine what they had in the early 17th century. Also, James I, like I said, remember we looked at the picture? He was super swaggy. Okay, this guy's like, I am a king and I'm going to dress like a king. I am going to portray myself as a king. You're going to obey me as a king. And whatever I do, you're going to be okay with. And he was into some things that maybe your average Englishman back then was not. In that he had a wife, he also had a male lover. Hey, I'm not judging him personally, but you imagine if the President of the United States showed up at a social event with a dude on his arm, with his arm around some guy, and he was canoodling with him, probably even the most tolerant person would be like, not sure that's the best move, Prez. Well, James I is taking over in 1603. You can imagine the homophobia which was rampant back then, especially since he did have a wife and child. So it was seen as kind of like a, this is not right. And this guy's this Scottish guy, and he's all bossy about everything. And the thing is, it's not like Parliament didn't accept that the king, or the queen in the example of Elizabeth I, had primacy over them. Elizabeth, though, would confer with them. She would go to Parliament and discuss things, and she would still make up her own mind, but they felt like they had a voice, Parliament did. And that had been that way ever since the Magna Carta, where the king made an agreement in writing where Parliament had to be consulted in matters of money. Well, here, James I is like, well, I want to be able to spend money on whatever I want. I do what I want. And he spends more in 1 year than Elizabeth spent during her entire reign. Keep in mind, she went to war with Spain and aided the Dutch against the Spanish. She was not just, spending money because she was just like, oh, I need to have these fancy neck frill things, that fancy things like she used to like, and go to plays by Billy Shakes, William Shakespeare, most people call him. No, she was like, hey, I'm going to spend money, but I'm going to do it for a reason. He is spending money, he being James I, like it's going out of style. And so Parliament is like, we're not liking you so much, bro. He's like, bro, do you know who I am? And he takes his own book, and he goes to a meeting of Parliament and reads to them from his own book, which is amazing. This would be like if your teacher was angry at you about not turning an assignment, and you wrote your own treatise, you wrote a little book or a pamphlet on why you should be able to turn things in whenever you want, and just went, and when your teacher tried to give you a 0, you lectured him or her on why you should be able to turn things in whenever you want. It's an interesting idea. Don't do it in my class, by the way. If you do that in my class, I'll be like, I told you to do that, doesn't count. Anyway, so what does James do? Tries to raise money without using Parliament. He sells land. Remember, there had been an influx of new property after Henry VIII had dissolved the monasteries. Some of that had been gifted or sold at a good rate to nobles. Well, James kind of continues that thing there. He also sells government positions and noble titles, literally allowing someone with the right amount of money to become a noble. Tacky! James dies eventually, 1625, and his son takes over. His son is Charles I. Charles, which literally means manly. I don't know if I've ever mentioned that in my lectures, but it does. It's a funny thing. Anyway, Parliament is like, now we got another one of these guys? And Charles I, right out the gate, this dude is like, oh yeah, meet my wife. She's the daughter of Henry IV. You might know him as Henry of Navarre, because he won the War of the Three Henrys, and he converted to Catholicism. Parliament's all like, whoa, but wait a second, bro. I imagine Parliament back then said bro a lot. I'm not sure about that, but I'm pretty sure I read it in a book at one point, so I'm just going to go with it. Anyway, they're like, yo, bro, we're a Protestant country. We've had bad experiences with Catholicism in recent memory, and they're referring to Mary I in this. And maybe you shouldn't be marrying Catholic girls? He's like, no, guys, it's cool. She converted. She is totally Protestant now, just like all of us, right? We're super Protestant. And then he appoints this guy named William Laud to write what's called the Book of Common Prayer. William Laud is seen as a Catholic supporter. He's not Catholic per se, but at a time of all this religious strife, having a guy who's really mean to anybody who's not in the Church of England, such as a group called the Puritans, who are literally, heckled, persecuted, treated all kinds of bad by Charles I and William Laud, by extension. He's like, those are just people that just wanted to purify the church of all of its Catholic leanings, which I know is not very tolerant or whatever, but this was not a tolerant time in history. There's no good guys here as far as tolerance goes, at least not in this lecture. So William Laud is like, I hate Puritans. Why are they gotta be so mean to Catholics? And people are like, wait a second, but we don't like Catholics. And he's like, oh yeah, totally. Hey, here's your new Book of Common Prayer, and it's hecka Catholic, as far as some people are concerned. And what that means is that the order of ceremonies during a typical Protestant Church of England worship ceremony is oddly similar to the way that Catholic Mass used to go. So people are like, we think this guy's too Catholic. We think he's secretly trying to low-key turn England into a Catholic country again. And Charles I is like, guys, what are you talking about? You're so paranoid. So he decides instead, you know what? I don't need you guys. You don't like me? Guess what? I don't like you. So he just dismisses Parliament and doesn't call them again for 11 years. And he just continues to collect taxes, which is illegal without Parliament because, again, the whole agreement that had been made back with the Magna Carta and all that said that the Parliament has to be involved in the money aspects of the crown. Doesn't talk to him, doesn't need anything. Then the Scottish rebel. Keep in mind, the Scottish are upset about this Book of Common Prayer because the Scots, remember, Presbyterianism has become very big there. And they don't like that William Laud is in such a position of authority, and they believe he's making England low-key Catholic, stealth becoming Catholic. So Charles goes to Parliament, he summons them again, he says, okay, look guys, I know I treated you bad, and Parliament's like, wait a second, okay? You can't just treat us badly and then expect us to just go along with whatever it is you say, okay? We're not going to put up with this anymore, okay? If this relationship is going to work, it's going to be a two-way street, Buster. And Charles is like, all right, what do you want? And Parliament's like, okay, well, for one, you can't just dismiss us and not call us. We have to meet at least once every 3 years. We'll call it the Triennial Act, which means the Once Every 3 Years Act. Which you gotta love the English, because they always name things what they are, and that's just a beautiful thing. So it's easier to figure out on the test. So, Parliament's like, all right. And he says, what else? He's like, but we don't want you to dismiss us at all. We want to stick around, bro. So we're going to give you this army. We're going to give you this army, bro. But we're going to continually try to check your power and check yourself before you wreck yourself. That's actually where that saying came from. It wasn't Ice Cube. It was the Parliament. So this is called the Long Parliament. Guess why? Because it meets for a long time, 20 straight years. In 1641, Charles finally gets sick of this, partially because there's another revolt, this time in Ireland. And Charles is like, guys, I need an army. And Parliament's like, are you serious again? I bet you're just going to try to take over the whole government. I bet you're just going to try to do what you want. And Charles is like, no, guys, bros, I wouldn't do that. And then as soon as he's out of sight, out of Parliament's sight, he's like, soldiers, can you go arrest parliamentary leaders? We want to take control of the government, not have to use Parliament anymore. And Parliament's all like, whoa! That's what we said was going to happen. They escape. They don't get arrested. And guess what? Now you got a civil war. This is the English Civil War. Called the English Civil War because it takes place in England, and it is a civil war. You've got on one side Charles I and people who are loyal to him. And they are called the Royalists. Sometimes they are called the Cavaliers. Alright, those are cool names. Parliament, apparently all the cool names were taken because they call themselves the Roundheads. Because their helmets were round. And their army is led by a dude named Oliver Cromwell. And this new model army is well-disciplined, excellent fighting force, and they managed to dispatch the Royalists in combat. So what are we going to do now with Charles? For real though, bros? This right here? It's my favorite slide of the year. Look at this elegance. Charles I loses war, comma, head. It's like a newspaper headline from the time period. It's my finest bit of teaching, and educating. I peaked out the first time I did that slide, and frankly, I don't think I'm ever going to be able to top it. Okay? Look at that. When it's behead and chill, and he looks at you like that. Anyway, so the leader of the Roundhead army is this guy, Oliver Cromwell. Man, that guy's stone-faced. Well, I mean, I hope you're joking there, because that's a statue, and besides, I think it's in bronze anyway. He just kind of sticks around after the Civil War is over with his army and says, "Oh, by the way, guys, I'm in charge now." And so we went from a war to keep the king from gaining too much power to a military dictatorship wherein Oliver Cromwell, who himself is a Puritan, enforces his Oliver Cromwell-ness onto England. He is famous for a number of things. One that still is in the memories of Irish people is that he shuts down that Irish revolt over there that, remember, Charles needed an army for, that Parliament didn't want to give him, and does it so brutally that he actually says, "I'm going to teach them a lesson that they will remember for generations." They do. They still remember this, okay? This is just another brick in the wall of separation between the Irish and the English, and this is a bad brick because he gives 75% of the land, two-thirds, that's not 75%, that's like 67% of the land to Protestants, and this begins a lot of conflict between Catholics and Protestants in Ireland. You could see here, this is in 1641, when, for the most part, you had a very Catholic Ireland. The greener it is, the more Catholic it is. And then by 1703, after the effects of Cromwell's land redistribution, there were a lot fewer Catholics. Well, Cromwell dies. His son tries to take over, but it's a short-lived thing, and he's overthrown. And Parliament's like, wow, we need to get rid of this Puritan dictatorship and bring us back somebody who can lead our country. And they choose Charles I's son, who is also named Charles, and there he is. Now, Charles II is sometimes known as the Merry Monarch because the Puritans had taken away a lot of what was fun about the world. You weren't allowed to drink, you weren't allowed to go to theater, you weren't allowed to play sports, you weren't allowed to celebrate Christmas, for gosh sakes. And Charles II is like, hey guys, I'm not Puritan. Guess what? YOLO time! Woo! That was meant to be like a party sound. I'm not familiar with a lot of party sounds, so I have to kind of make them up like I imagine they would sound. Anyway, so Parliament restores the Stuarts. It's called the Restoration of the English Monarchy. Get Charles II as king. Everything is great. There's the Merry Monarch right there, as immortalized by horrible histories. Something that should be your favorite show about history. It's much more accurate probably than Rain on the CW or whatever. Okay, whoa, Mr. Oliver, what happened there? Charles at first tries really hard to get along with Parliament, but he ultimately wants more money from them, and they're very tight with their purse strings. They don't want to give him any money. So he crafts a secret deal with Louis XIV of France to secretly re-Catholicize England. You might recall from a couple of slides ago, that was what they were worried about with his dad, Charles I, trying to stealth make England more Catholic. And they kind of had a civil war and chopped off homie's head. So when they find out about this, they're like, yo, Charles II, what are you doing? And he, demonstrating excellent timing, doesn't have to deal with the scandal because he dies. So he dies. Then we end up with James II. And James II, he was, I believe, James was the brother of Charles I. He had been off doing his own thing, and he was like super Catholic. And when he becomes king in 1685, he immediately just starts being like, yeah, what's wrong with religious tolerance here? Hey, we're all Christians, right? So he starts appointing Catholics to high offices. They're not supposed to do that. There was this thing that Parliament had tried to get passed under Charles II called the Test Act, where it was basically like, you cannot have a job unless you are part of the Church of England. And it was meant to persecute anyone who was not part of the Church of England. Well, he's sort of ignoring it here, isn't he? James II, that is, not Charles II. I mean, I guess Charles II was ignoring it, given that he was dead, but James II is the one they were more concerned about. So they say, look, what are we going to do about this? Then he dissolves Parliament. He says, look, I'm an absolute monarch. People are freaking out. James II is a Catholic, giving religious freedom to Catholics. Now, in our world, we look at this and go like, well, okay, that's really great because of diversity and all of the things like that, because we want diversity, because that's a good thing. But back then, 1685, nope, they did not want diversity. They wanted no diversity, the opposite of diversity, intolerance, I guess that would be a different way of saying no diversity. So, when James's wife gives birth to a son, they go, oh no, we are now going to have another Catholic dynasty. James II, he gave birth to his wife gave birth to a son. Oh no, what are we going to do? And somebody in Parliament's like, bros, what if we just overthrow the king? And they're like, we did that already, bro. Last time, remember Oliver Cromwell and blah, blah, blah. We need to have a king in England. And he's like, bro, what if we just invite his daughter, who is a Protestant, to take over the throne? I'm like, wait a second. So you're suggesting we overthrow James II by inviting James's own daughter, Mary, and her husband, who is a Dutch dude named William of Orange, to come over and just become king? Yeah, bro, that's what we'll do. And they do. And James runs away. And this is not thought of as a gory, bloody revolution. It's quite the opposite. They call it the Glorious Revolution. And James goes and lives in France. Louis XIV takes care of his homie. Hey, how do you do, secret plotting buddy? Good job trying to make them all Catholic, but it didn't work out. It's all good. I'm going to conquer Europe anyway. No, you're not. Pip, governor. You're not going to conquer Europe. That didn't work out. Like, no, I got the plan with Spain. That's called the War of the Spanish Succession. We got to totally win. And, well, we already know about that. He doesn't win the War of the Spanish Succession. Long story short. So here's this handsome couple right here. There's William, and there's Mary, and they take over. And from this point on, you're going to see a shift. England will no longer be flirting with absolutism. From now on, they're going to pretty much be a constitutional monarchy. And a constitutional meaning there is a piece of paper that severely limits what the powers of the monarch are, and Parliament will be running the show for the most part. From here on out, you don't have any super strong monarchs. It's pretty much Parliament that is the prime mover. There's William and Mary again. They were so handsome as far as a couple went, I thought you might enjoy more pictures of them. Not really. They're pretty ugly, actually. I'm sorry about that. Anyway, so the king has to agree to this new Bill of Rights, and William's like, dude, you guys just gave me a throne along with Bay here. She's like, actually, it's because of my bloodline. It's because my dad was king. He's like, whatever, babe. It's all good. Now we're in charge. And Parliament's like, hey, well, you need to sign this Bill of Rights. And he's like, hey, cool, let's sign it. Number one, king can't dissolve Parliament anymore. All of Parliament's decisions must be followed. Guess what else? We're not going to have a big old standing army. Something that absolutists need to have to enforce their laws. What about the citizens' rights? Boom, they have certain rights. Automatic, built in. You got to even let people know what they're accused of. That's habeas corpus. The writ of habeas corpus says basically you have to know what you are being accused of. You have to have someone come and testify against you. And they even say, like, look, you got to even have a trial by a jury. And the parliament is now the most dominant branch of the government. I'm going to stop there because it's almost time to go into the scientific revolution. Bye-bye, bros. Bye-bye.